the Housing Committee for consideration of the Canterbury Property Boundaries and Related Matters Bill, the Shop Trading Hours Amendment Bill, the Child Protection Child Sex Offender Register Bill, the Evidence Amendment Bill and the Electronic Monitoring of Offenders Legislation Bill. Members, we first turn to the Canterbury Property Boundaries and Related Matters Bill.
Point of order.
Tim McIntyre, point of order.
Mr Chairman, with the agreement of the whips throughout the House, I seek leave for the committee to consider the separate parts of the Canterbury Property Boundaries and Related Matters Bill in one debate, with the questions to be taken separately at its conclusion.
Leave is sought for that purpose. Is there any objection? There appears to be none. The question is that parts 1 and 2, Schedule 1 and clauses 1 to 3 stand part. Those are of that. Oh, Megan Woods.
Sorry.
Dr. Megan
Thank you,
Woods.
Mr Chairman, and it is my pleasure to take a call in committee stages on this bill, and it's a piece of legislation that, as a Canterbury Member of Parliament, that I am eager to see pass through this House, because it is a piece of legislation that is required by many homeowners in the Canterbury region in order to get on with their lives, to settle their insurance claims and to be able to begin the process of rebuilding. Because what this bill does, Mr Chairman, is something quite fundamental. Is it acknowledges that after a series of earthquakes of the magnitude such as we have seen in the Canterbury region since 2010, that the land has moved. And when the land has moved, Mr Chairman, the boundaries need to move with it, because there are a range of discrepancies. There are around 11,000 properties in the Canterbury region where there has been a greater than 20 centimetre either horizontal or vertical movement of the land. So this is no small problem that needs to be rectified for those 11,000 people for whom this is a problem. And this piece of legislation seeks to tidy that up, Mr Chairman, to look at that. I think that there are some important changes that the Select Committee were able to make when it heard submissions and then came to consider this piece of legislation. And they were important because some interesting questions were raised. It has to be said, Mr Chairman, there weren't submissions in the thousands, but there were some very quality submissions of this. The Christchurch City Council gave a very considered submission, the Law Society gave a very considered submission, and we did hear a number of points raised from the surveying community and professional surveyors and what their views. One of the things that has happened during the passage of this legislation, of course, Mr Chairman, is the dates which it's covered have to change. After the Valentine's quake of this year in Canterbury, the cut-off date for when this legislation would apply needed to be moved out. So the decision was made to extend this legislation out from a 6-year period from now to 2022, in recognition that there was further land movement on February 14 of this year with that quake in the Christchurch region. So, Mr Chairman, it is heartening to see the government realising the long-term impacts that the earthquakes are having to the city of Christchurch and the region of Canterbury. I would implore this minister to perhaps speak to some of her colleagues about the ongoing mental health issues in the Canterbury region, about some of the other ongoing impacts that are going, because it is heartening to see in this piece of legislation, Mr Chairman, that the dates have been extended out in clause 4 of this piece of legislation. The other piece of the other clause that I would like to speak to in this is clause 8 of this legislation, and this is addressing a title conflict. So this goes to the heart of what happens when there is a conflict between two property owners around a title, where the land has moved, and it may be, when we talk about the land moving, it may be that someone's garage now resides on their neighbour's property, or it may be that someone who is seeking to rebuild on a parcel of land, that parcel of land is substantially different for the purposes of where the boundaries of that land are in terms of the rebuild. So the Select Committee did make some recommendations to the original legislation that amended clause 8.1 to clarify that the approved interim surveys must satisfy the provisions in both clause 8.1a and 8.1b. So one of the things that this piece of legislation does, Mr Chairman, is it goes back and retrospectively validates some of the surveying that has been done in the nearly 6 years since the the September quake of 2010. But in order for that to be validated, it does have to satisfy those requirements in clause 8.1a and 8.1b. And this is important that we can have certainty in the Canterbury region around what it is that we are retrospectively validating. Because the last thing that any of us want to see is these boundaries come back and be disputed, and for people to enter a further period of uncertainty around their homes and around their properties. One of the other issues that came up that would come within here, Mr Chairman, was a number of submitters made the recommendation to have a dispute resolution framework included in this legislation, with the inevitable conclusion that there would be disputes between property owners, between neighbours, around how it was that the boundaries now fitted together in the changed landscape of the Canterbury region. The officials were of the opinion, Mr Chairman.
Dr. Megan Wood.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. The committee was of the opinion that the Property Law Act of 2007 and the Land Transport Act provided adequate mechanisms to deal with those disputes. And there wasn't a requirement in this piece of legislation for specific dispute resolutions. Mr Chairman, I just would like to signal that is something that we do need to keep a watching brief on and check that that is a fit-for-purpose mechanism that is able to deal with the particular nature of any of the disputes that may arise within this piece of legislation. But Mr Chairman, Labor is supporting this bill. We are supporting it at this committee stage. We've supported it all the way through. We think that it is really important that we do get this matter rectified for many constituents in the Christchurch area and many citizens in the wider Canterbury area. Their insurance claims cannot be settled until these issues are settled. So this is absolutely critical that we do get this, and perhaps once this roadblock is removed from getting people's insurance claims settled, maybe the government can look at removing some further roadblocks for allowing Cantabrians to get on with their lives. But Mr Chairman, Labor is happy to commend this legislation to the House and will be supporting it. Thank you.
The Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. It's a pleasure to